Everybody in line.
I wish I could get a few people in line.
Well, now, okay,
No,
tell me who Mamaw was then. Is Mamaw
That was my grandmother.
your grandmother?
Yeah. Betty no.
The
And Al's
Betty, no, well,
Yeah.
okay, I've got the
No
no.
E.
Okay, but this says Pence. Now, how did the Pence come into
That was
that?
Aunt Louise. That was the daughter.
Louise. Married
She was-
Jack Pence.
Oh, she was
Louise.
a sister to your
Yeah.
dad?
Yeah, that's,
Well, I just thought he had three brothers. I thought there was-
No, he had 3 brothers.
I thought there was Otto and your dad.
No.
Who was the other one? What was
Gus.
dad? What was?
Gus.
Gus.
August.
Gus,
Gus,
Albert.
Albrecht, and Otto.
No, wait, I've
And
got
then-
Otto,
Okay,
Gus,
so-
Albert, and who? Albert, and who?
Okay.
Otto, Gus,
August.
And Louise.
August.
Louise is Pence.
Louise was the oldest.
the oldest.
Now, I just missed them by a hair because they died just before we got married.
Okay, then your sister's name is Louise.
Yes, after Aunt Louise.
Uh-huh, okay.
Our youngest sister.
Oh, she's the youngest, she's the youngest.
Yeah,
Oh,
she was a
the
baby.
youngest, okay. Okay, now who's, what rank, are you the oldest?
No.
I'm older than him.
You're older than him, and older than Edwin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm 77. He's
There
70.
was,
You're
Irvin.
72, aren't you, June?
Irvin, yeah. How old was he?
Urban was the oldest.
He was
Then
69 when he
Lucille.
got killed.
Oh, he got killed.
He got killed in an automobile accident.
Urban was the oldest, then Lucille, then Emil, then Gatley, and
Oh, you're
then me.
going way too fast for me. Lucille, and then who?
Then me,
Emil,
Amy. And then
Edwin.
Edwin. He was named after a general at Fort Knox,
Edwin Gatley.
Edwin Gatley.
Uh-huh.
And then Everest over there. And Elizabeth and Louise.
And Louise.
So Lucille wanted some little sisters and she finally got them.
Mhm.
So,
they're
is her
bigger
health
than-
pretty good?
Ma'am?
Is her health pretty good?
Yeah, about like a horse.
Oh.
But her eyesight is bad, right?
Yeah,
She doesn't.
she's legally blind.
Is she?
Oh, Lucille is, yes. But Elizabeth and Louise, well, they're all thicker than thieves. They call each other long distance every day.
That's good, that's
And-
good.
I was feeling
Oh,
bad.
Elizabeth and Louise.
I was feeling bad last Sunday a week ago, and Lucille wanted to know why I didn't go to church, and I told her I didn't feel good. She got on the phone and called Louise, and Louise called Elizabeth, and Elizabeth called me, how do you feel? I said, I feel all right today. Well, Lucille said you were feeling bad, so, I mean, you can't get anything past them 3 sisters of mine.
Oh, that's good.
She can't see, but she can talk.
And then, let's see, Otto, Gus, Albert, and that's not Albert. it's
Albrecht.
Albrecht.
Albert in German.
A-L-B-R-A.
Pap had about 5 names, but I don't know
In
what they
German.
were.
That'd be
Yeah,
German.
Pap had about 5 names. Uncle Albert in Germany, he had, I think, about 6 names.
You have to be named after all your
What,
family.
what they did, this is just like, okay, if you're the youngest child and you have a child, okay, then you name, if it's a boy, it's Irvin, Emil, Gatley, Albert.
Oh, my, so you know, if you know their name, you know the lineup of the brothers and
There you
sisters
go.
and
That's
everybody,
about
knows
the
the
size of
family
it,
history,
yeah.
huh?
And everybody would feel slighted if they didn't have their name on the lineage.
You gotta have their name.
Oh, my.
If you were
Some
cut
of the
short, that
drunk
was
kids, you
terrible.
wouldn't stand a chance, would you? Never learn to spell your
And
name in school.
Uncle Albert there in Germany, he would, Pap was Uncle Albert's godfather.
So how much older was he than Pap?
Oh, I don't know.
Span of 20 years or?
Well, no, Pap was older than him.
And Pep's been
Oh.
dead since
Because-
40.
Uncle Albert in Germany, he was 83 when I was in Germany,
Mm.
82 or 83.
Oh,
And he died when
I think it was 83. That's what I remember, it was 83.
Yeah. And, but he got around real well.
Mm.
He had a peacocks, a peafowl in his backyard.
Oh.
And he'd open his window. He had a room that was kind of round. One side was round, all windows. And he'd open the window, and like those windows in there, he'd get a pinch of bread and call him and beep, 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 beep. And they'd come up there and fly up on the window and he'd give them a piece
Here's
of
the
bread.
peacocks,
Yeah. And they would
they spread their feathers.
they would spread their fan, and he had a peafowl display pen in the backyard. That sucker was, I imagine it was 100, 150 years old. And it was up over, or next to one of the vents for the wine cellar, for the wine cellar. And it was, I think it must have been, what, about 20 feet across. And it was square iron bars, and that's what it was. It was a peacock display pen. And he had seven rose gardens in the yard. And the Germans, they didn't have much of a yard because their land was very scarce. But he had the Stations of the Cross around his yard there because his house had been an old nunnery. And they had taken, after the war, they took 1.5 meters off of the fence, brick wall around his yard. But as you were asking a while ago about the stories that I'd heard about how our grandfather came to the United States, one story that I heard was that he didn't want to serve in the Kaiser's army, didn't want to serve in the German army. Another story was that he didn't want to go to the university. And see, in the line of heritage in Germany, usually the oldest child, they inherit the farm. And the younger children, they get the education. But anyway, he didn't want to go to the university. And then another story I heard was that my great-grandfather had told my grandfather, who was 18 or 19 at the time, says, now don't you keep
Oh,
your
what's that,
hands
June?
off of the upstairs maid.
June, he was only 17 when he was teaching mathematics at University of Maryland.
Anyway, he was young.
And he was young, yeah.
But anyway, he told him, and so he was out in the courtyard there, and he happened to look upstairs, and saw my grandfather grab the upstairs maid and hug her. And the upstairs maid was a good friend of my great-grandfather's, and he did that against my great-grandfather's wishes. So that was it.
Sent to America.
So they sent him to America, and his brother took him up to Bremerhaven and put him on a boat. And then he came on home, and that night it was raining and storming, and there was a knock on the door, and there was Pap there at the door. And he says, well, because of the weather, I'll let you come in, spend the night, but the first thing in the morning, you're going back to Bremerhaven. You're going back to there. So he told his older brother to take him back up there and put him on the boat and tell the captain of the ship to lock him in the cabin
So they get
until the ship clears the port. And that's what happened.
That's how you.
So he never saw him again?
Oh yeah, he what did he make, four trips or 5 trips back to Germany?
He made 3, I believe. One time, Memo didn't know where he was. He went to E-Town for something, and then a day or 2 later, he was in New York and sent out a telegram, said he's going back to Germany.
Oh, great.
Well, another story that I heard was that
Oh, Daddy told me that.
he took a horse and buggy into Eastview, and he decided to go home to Germany. So he had a neighbor take the horse and buggy back to the home there. And my grandmother was pregnant with my father, and I think my father was, what, 9, 10 months old, first time my grandfather saw him.
I didn't know
He was
that
over there
part.
that long.
I didn't know that part.
Well, there's a lot of stories
Now,
about
How
my
did
mother.
how did they come to Kentucky instead of just landing on the East Coast.
The first Department of Agriculture. That's how I got to Kentucky. He was a veterinarian surgeon, however, whatever that means, was a horse doctor or what. He got hooked up with the government, and the government sent him to Iowa to raise hogs. Find out how they could, raise
There's a
hogs
lot of
commercially.
Nackies in our way too.
That's what
Yes.
I'm wondering.
I don't know
Just what
whether
I
he was
asked you.
very prolific or what.
Well, anyway, then they sent him from Iowa after he did whatever he did about raising hogs. Then they sent him to Kentucky to find out why Kentucky could raise hogs as well as he did in Iowa. And now that's how he met that pretty little girl walking down the road. That he was riding my horse, and I passed her, and I made arrangements to meet her. That was Betty.
Well,
Betty is your grandmother.
Betty was a servant
Better
girl
know.
in a house just outside of Elizabethtown. And this is one story that I heard when my grandfather met her. And they'd had a ball there, and it used to be a big old two-story brick house. And it was
Politicians and everybody else.
sitting back off the road there. And a bunch of crooked politicians was what it was. And they tore that house down, 15 years ago?
Yeah, 50.
Made 3 brick houses out of the bricks. But the bricks had been made by slaves. And they dug the clay right there on the place.
But that's how he met our grandmother. He passed her on the road first, and then he arranged to meet her at that party that they had. And then they got married, and were the end result.
My sister has got a letter at home.
And here we are.
It was written during the First World War by the Secretary of the Army. And it was to my grandfather. And my grandfather, it was a letter of appreciation because he had recruited some 200 and some men to serve in the Army. And this was a letter of appreciation that was sent to my grandfather, who was a Deputy United States Marshal at Fort Knox. And I recall hearing a story about how Sheriff Nacke, who was supposed, I think, county sheriff at the time, had intercepted.
They're trying.
I didn't even know.
That's what I-
Grow up, see,
I remember so well when Uncle Gus died. And Daddy
Up here on that way, I can hear.
I told how Foley was only 8 or 9 years old and out trying to plow on that hillside. And the plow was bigger than he was.
You gotta relocate everything.
Trying and trying to plow. And Daddy come home and says, "You all know now how good he does." And of course, and that was his nephew, and he just felt so sorry for his nephew.
But his dad made him do that?
No, he was
Okay,
dead.
his father
Uncle Gus
died.
died.
Oh.
When old Foley was only 8 or 9 years old.
He was trying to plow.
Sure.
He was trying to plow and on an old hillside, and the plow was bigger than he was, and they hit a rock or something,
You
and
want,
Foley
you want here?
practically fall all over the plow, and Daddy come home
Oh,
with tears in his eyes
the same
about
story over
nephew,
again?
how hard he had it, trying to make a plow.
Yeah.
You tell me you want to hear about the whiskey bus.
Okay, now what, your dad was a farmer,
Can you put
or
all
was
that
he
on the
military,
same
he
page
was a
later?
military man, political man, that sort of thing. He didn't farm.
He was a carpenter.
Carpenter.
He worked the L&N Railroad till they had a strike, and then he wouldn't go back to work.
Now, Mel, what Uncle Gus, what did he die with?
Who, my dad?
Now, Uncle Gus had a heart trouble.
And that other uncle that died early, when Foley said.
That was Uncle
That's Uncle
Gus.
Gus.
Yeah.
And what was Daddy's problem? Old age? He was 80 what, 84?
No, he was 89. He was almost
89.
90.
Let's hear about the whiskey bust again.
Oh.
You want to get it on tape now.
Well, what it was, I understand that when my grandfather was a sheriff, I think, or deputy United States Marshal there in Hardin County, he intercepted a wagon load of whiskey there at Tip Top. That's where Highway 60 and 31W joined there at Fort Knox. And
Fort Knox is just down the road, what, just a couple of miles, 2-3 miles?
well, it's right
All
on,
of it's
right on
joined
the coast
now.
right now. But anyway, he intercepted the whiskey, and he notified the Hardin County Enterprise that Sheriff Nacke had intercepted this whiskey, and it was destroyed on the spot. So they took a couple of jugs and busted them in the ditch, and then poured some whiskey over top of it there for a little smell. And in the meantime, there was another wagon or a truck unloaded and put the whiskey in his truck and took it down home and put it in the meat house. And Daddy said that he has seen a number of times that you couldn't get in the meat house because of all the whiskey that was in there that had been confiscated.
It wasn't the first time he confiscated the whiskey either.
Yeah.
He got several loads of
Well,
whiskey.
and there was another story down about Pap that he got caught one time dynamiting fish by the game warden. So it seems that the game warden walked up on him, and Pap had been dynamiting fish, and he had these fish here in a basket, I think, or a sack or something like that. The game warden walked up on him, and he said, "Well, hello there, Charlie Brown," or whatever his name was. He says, "And how is your lovely wife?" He said, "I've got some nice fish here for her. Take this home and have her prepared for you." And so Pap was doing all the talking, and the game warden was standing there with his mouth hanging open. And so then he said something about, he asked Pap if he was dynamiting fish. He says, "What makes you think I was dynamiting fish? If I was, you're as guilty as I am because you accepted the fish."
I thought he was working up to
You got the
something.
fish,
So
huh?
he would get the blame.
Oh, my.
I always thought he was a gentle old man, cause barely toddled around, couldn't find his glasses.
Oh,
so
mercy,
that's
don't
better.
worry about that.
Well, see, that's all I've heard is the tail end.
He wouldn't work a day for nothing.
I never did hear
But
of
he
him
would,
working.
he would bargain you out of something.
he would
He sold
trade.
stock.
He would trade. He'd trade you a pig for a cow, or he'd trade you a sheep for a goat or something like that. But I never knew him to work. And he always had a few pigs.
He sold stock. Sold stock in that, what was it, Jim? The,
Dan Kirk Sandpit.
no, what was it? Kentucky Rock. Kentucky Rock. Down at Summit.
Limestone Mill.
Yeah, he
Or
sold
nine.
stock down there, but they wouldn't pay him off. I wasn't gonna sell any more stock, and they said, "Oh, Mr. Nacke, we need you to sell some stock." He said, "You put the money up there in escrow, and I'll sell the stock, but I'm not gonna work for nothing." And he had this fellow Lively that lived up the street from us, and he drove Pap. Pap couldn't drive a car, but he always owned an automobile. And he made 2 trips to Louisville one day in that old Model T Ford, negotiating with somebody back and forth on stock. But he also sold spectacles.
Yeah.
People in the neighborhood, they bring their old glasses to him, and he'd get out his glasses case and he'd get this and that and the other. I think he fixed them up for $1 or so a pair of glasses.
And he really didn't do anything to them? Clean them or?
They were magnifying glasses, more like reading glasses.
But I mean, but they felt they could see better after he polished them.
Well, he didn't
Well,
polish them, he just sold the spectacles.
they had a
Glasses,
certain magnification factor. They could see better because everything was magnified.
So he set off and got this case of the lenses, and then he would match up the lenses so you could see better. Then he'd get $1 for his work, I guess.
Not like them drugstore glasses or something you
Drugstore
can get,
glasses, yeah.
yeah.
But Mr. Nacke, they always come to him.
And we'll,
And he wouldn't think a thing about selling a vote for 50 cents. He'd pay 50 cents for a vote. Come election day. Yeah, come election day, he'd be the first one there. And he knew whether you voted or not.
Sat there on a little stool
Well,
watching.
and back then, election day was a big deal. Everybody come out and was gathering around the polls. Of course, they had a little drinking going on, but that was illegal. And that's why they said no more drinking around the voting polls, because everybody gets drunk and get to fighting about who was voting
bars are closed on election day.
After I got in the Army,
Nacke
I went
started
home on
that.
furlough this one time. I went out to Pap's old place there with my dad, and we went out hunting. It was rabbit hunting. And, so we started out down in the bottom and up over the hillside there, up towards the Shingle Holler Pond. We got up there so far, and then Daddy started looking around and acting all peculiar and everything like that. And then he says, okay, let's go back over this way. So we went up another bottom, up towards Aunt Carrie's old place. And we got up there so far, and Dad was looking around there, and he said, okay, we're going back over the hill here. We went in a straight line there, 4 different places. And there was 4 different people making bootleg whiskey there, and he was checking to see if they were still making it, see if the stills were still working.
Oh,
There's my old farm down there. My dad and I went down to this big low spot, and I said, what in the world is that old gas stove doing down here? It was just an old gas stove. And he said, son, you can't imagine all the whiskey's been made on this stove. It was just down in the woods. And they paid a man $3 a day. In the summertime, they wore an old overcoat. And he'd see somebody coming, and he had an old dog, and they'd take out his shotgun and his dog, and they'd say, well, I hunted all over here, and we didn't find a thing, and he'd lead them back over in the other direction. But that was his job. He got paid $3 a day for keeping everybody away from this distillery.
but what helped to have the coat on in the summertime?
Had his shotgun, and he had
Oh.
rabbits that he might have killed.
Out of season.
I think $3 a day, you got to have a coat
Oh,
on.
that was a lot of money, but the bootlegger didn't want to get caught.
Right.
But I mean, I thought it was strange that Daddy said, son, you just have no idea how much whiskey's been made
Made on that
stuff."
stove.
Well, there was one of these old stoves with the water and ovens, and Tom just had the little bit of burners over here, but I guess it's big enough for a still. And,
Put a boiler on.
oh yeah.
People
We-
make,
We were squirreling up next Sunday.
one day, talking about making your booze or whatever. Across the highway from where we live, a couple moved from maybe St. Louis or some other town. And, everybody, before we got to know him very well, first thing we know, that man shoots his wife, kills her in the house, and he drags her out to the garage. And so when the police come, they went over just inspecting all the buildings, or I don't know why, they're just looking all around for some reason. And they found a little building in the backyard next door, and it was full of mash and all that stuff, and they cracked some of them bottles, you had that stink all over the neighborhood.
Oh, don't tell us about getting raided, we know that.
But I mean,
We
there
got
had to
raided one
smell
morning
all
about
that,
2
and
o'clock.
we, as kids, we wondered what in the world shot off.
June, how old were you when Daddy got raided? You about
I
fifth or
think
sixth
I was
grade,
in
wasn't you?
the 1st or 2nd grade.
Well, anyway, the
And-
police came
and
about
Rufus-
2 o'clock in the morning.
Rufus Barnes, a neighbor, turned
I
him
remember
in,
that name.
because Daddy wouldn't sell him any whiskey, because Rufus
He,
was drunk.
he came over to our house and wanted to buy some whiskey, and Daddy wouldn't tell him any because he was drunk. So then he went down to the police station, and they told him, said, I think I know where this is still. And the policeman said, well, you must be drunk already. And he said, no, I'll take you where it is. So he brought him up to Duncan Street, so Daddy said later, and he must have
And
checked up on it.
Daddy came out of the house, he saw him standing across the street there on the corner. He says, I know damn good well.
Well, see, they didn't realize there was really a still there,
And
and
before Daddy
Jim?
got out of the workhouse, Rufus went headed for Chicago, I think, or Detroit.
June, anyway, there's the paint wagon. The police had an old paint wagon that they used to paint the stop signs on the street, and that's the paddy wagon they used to haul Daddy to jail. Because the regular paddy wagon was out. And Daddy went into the police station carrying his still, and they said, well, see, we got one here. So they put him on back in the cell, and he went to jail and come out the next day. And Logan Basham, which is one of my daddy's good hunting buddies, he knew this lady that owned the dry goods store, and he went to her and told her about his friend, got caught making whiskey, and he's a good, honest man, and I want you to go up and get him out. So she won his bond, and he got out of jail, and in the meantime, Logan Basham got to the judge and had it all arranged where he wouldn't do any more than the $100 fine. See, the deal at that time was a $100 fine and 30 days in the workhouse for, making whiskey or beer. So they got the 30 days worked off, and the $100 fine, you could work it out in the workhouse for $2 a day. Well, my dad wasn't working anyway, so he took the workhouse for $2 a day. And he got out in 48 days, and he got out in 2 days for good behavior. But the county had a farm, you see, and Daddy went down to the farm, and every morning at 4 or 5 o'clock, he'd get up and go out and pick up the mules, plow, and they really liked him. You see, the deal at the workhouse is they had a bunch of bums, but my dad, he was an honest bum. But I was there, sitting on the front row in the police court, and old Logan Basham went up to Judge, oh mercy, Judge something. Judge, isn't that a fine looking bunch of kids there? Yes, sir, that's a fine bunch of
We
kids.
was all-
7 of them, all shined up, old clean faces and
I
clean
think all
clothes.
7 of us was there.
All 7 of them. That's the only day we ever let us miss school.
And we were late
Get him
going to
on
school.
court.
We were late going to school, and and after we got out of court, Mom says, well, y'all go to school. So we went down to school there, and the teacher asked me, he says, well, why are you late to school? I says, we've been up in court, my daddy got caught making whiskey.
But the thing that made Mom mad is he had just put on a batch of mash, just opened a 100-pound bag of sugar, and then when we got up to the police court, she didn't have 2 pounds of sugar in the bag rather. And she said, here I am, my husband is in jail, I got 7 kids, and the police stole all my sugar. But they dumped all the mash out on the roof, and then we had to get a hose up there and wash it down into the gutter, and neighbors on both sides were watching us, and they knew, Ernie Bidwell knew he was making whiskey, but the keepers, I don't think they did.
Oh, sure they did.
But anyway, the one neighbor on the other side,
He was making home.
he knew that my dad was making whiskey, but he didn't say anything about it. He was a fine fellow. But I know we were out there dumping this stuff out and washing down the drain and getting rid of the mash before daylight.
And Will, how did the name Nacke come to be?
Well, a story that we heard was that there was, Nacke was a blacksmith and wheelwright there in Germany, and the Emperor of Germany was going down the road in his big fancy carriage, and when he was about 100 yards from the blacksmith shop there,
It's either
he broke a wheel.
out there, or it could be the top of the fishing
The
cabinet.
carriage dropped down. So he went down there and took the place of a wheel, and took it on up there to his blacksmith shop.
To dry land, at least.
Yeah, well, to where he could fix it, and then he repaired the wheel and put it back on there, and the Emperor of Germany thought that was such a wonderful feat of strength that he gave him a free estate, or a section of land and everything, and supposedly a title.
That was, I understood that was about 20 hectares. Now, however big that was. But anyway, that started the family in the real estate business. And then the family grew. How big was the family estate over there?
I don't know. I talked to the farm manager, and he said he had been the farm manager since 1942. Now, that was 1964, 65, I was up there. He said he'd been the farm manager since 1942, and I said, well, how big is the farm? He says, you see that hill there? I said, yeah. And the next hill, yeah. And the next hill after that, he says, that's how far over it goes. And that was a couple of hundred acres, anyway. But the farm itself had a wall around it with an entrance gate on two sides there. I had seen old pictures of a tish or a lake out in front of the house. It was a professionally taken picture, and it showed the scenery and everything like that. And I asked Uncle Albert about that. He said, oh, he says, they filled that in. They filled that in. At first, he didn't know what I was talking about, but then finally he remembered, and he said that they had filled that lake in. But I was talking to the farm manager there too, and he said that I was the first American soldier to come there from the Great War, or since the Great War. He says the last American soldiers that was here, said they came in that gate there in a big tank, and they parked right here, and they pointed their guns at me, and they said, are there any SS troops around here? And he says, no, there's never been any SS troops here. He said, well, if we find any SS troops here, we're going to shoot you and burn the farm. And so he says they searched through the house and through the barns and everything. They couldn't find any SS troops. Now the SS troops were the Schutzstaffel. That was the Death Head troops. And after they made their search, they couldn't find anyone. So then he said they got in their big tank and they went out that gate over there. And from that time till now, you're the first American soldier to come here.
Put down, they only had one or two incendiary bombs that hit the granary. And the people there on the farm, they took buckets of sand and put the incendiary bombs out. But that's the only damage they had on the farm during the war.
That's World War I.
No, World War II.
Two.
Now Uncle Albert, he had 3 bottles of wine in the cellar from 1911, from 1911. 1911 was a vintage year, and those 3 bottles of wine went through 2 occupation periods, and it was damp down in the wine cellar, but they had a little piece of slate written on there in chalk about what the name of it was and the date, and that was written on there, and the slate was put up in this little compartment, cubbyhole. And I'll bet you, I tried to get Dad to come over there, visit them, but he would rather have gotten a tractor. So he bought a tractor rather than come over to Germany. And he says, no, he says, I don't know any of them over there or anything. He says, it just seemed like a waste of money. But
I thought for one time Daddy was going over.
I thought he was.
I think Lucille was going with him. But he said, no, I said, hell, I ain't got nothing against them people. I don't know any of them. And he would have been one of the family.
Yeah,
One-
he
one of the
would have
Post
gotten
family.
quite a welcome. I'm satisfied.
Oh, yeah.
But now what about that name Nacke? Wasn't that longer than that one time?
Well, Shamo, that's when after he got the carriage out over on the dry land, then he benighted him or whatever he did,
Oh.
and changed his name from Shamo to Nacke. And Nacke meant back, strong back.
Well, the Schimmel is an old family
Schimmel.
name, but it evolved over a long period of time. I think we have the written history of our family back to 1443.
You have the written history?
We, Uncle, the doctor, what was his name? Hans,
Dr. Hans,
Dr. Hans.
yeah.
Now, he had a book
He
there,
made
even
it
had
up.
our names in it.
And you have one?
Yeah, I've got it at home.
Boy, wouldn't you like to see that or have that?
You got the book?
Yeah. But it isn't printed very good. It's you know, it's
Now, you gotta know German.
there has been a lot of,
That cancels that.
there's been a lot of copies made off of it, and part of it is missing. You just can't read it.
That's probably German script too.
Well, no, not really. It's typewritten. But there were stories in there. One of them was about the bastard son of so-and-so girl. And it said that, what it was a will. It was a will. And they said that this bastard son of this person there, this girl, he was left
Legacy.
a shirt and a pair of pants and
Two shirts, a
shoes.
pair of pants, a pair of shoes.
Two pair of pants and a pair of shoes
Each
annually.
year from the estate.
From the
Anything the
estate.
estate made, then he was to be assured of having food. I mean, they gave him a place to live, and he was to have 2 shirts, 2 pair of pants, a pair of shoes every year for his well-being. And I guess that was something that was carried out, but he was a deaf mute.
Was he a deputy?
Yeah, he's a deaf mute.
I don't remember.
And that's why they had to make sure that he had, you know, something to wear and a place to stay.
But now the farm, were they mostly grapes? I mean, did they
No,
harvest the grapes?
no.
No, it was a
See, this
regular
is up in
farm.
northern
This
Germany.
is northern Germany.
Yeah, they raised livestock and row crops.
Uh-huh.
Only in southern Germany, that's where they
The grape farm.
they had the Weinbau, you know, with the grape vineyards. And Uncle Albert married this woman, and the name of the farm is Oberstleutnant Liebricht, Lieutenant Colonel Liebricht. Well, after the First World War, Lieutenant Colonel Liebricht went to Java, and he organized the natives there and had them clear off a lot of the jungle and everything, planted rubber trees, cocoa, and something else. And that was their crops. Well, after they planted this and everything, he developed this huge plantation. Then just before the Japanese came in 1941 or 42, he sold it for cash. And then after he sold it, he took the money and went back to Germany. When he went back to Germany, then I think he I don't know whether he owned this wine vineyard, or whether he inherited it, or whether he bought it. But anyway, Uncle Albert married into the family. And he was mentioned in the wines of the world. It says the descendants from Oberstleutnant Liebricht have furthered the wine-making cause in Germany. And that was speaking of Uncle Albert. But Uncle Albert had, his youngest son was killed over in East Germany on the last day of the war. He was an Unterleutnant, I think he was 18 or 19. And our oldest cousin, Fritz, he was frostbitten in Russia, in Stalingrad. And Fritz told me, he says, Albert, you would not believe how cold it was over there. He said it was so cold we could not stop the engines of our tanks. They had to run all the time. And he says if one of them stopped, they would take 25 horses and hook a chain onto to these tanks and pull them to get them started. And then they wouldn't let them stop again. And but he had his hands and his feet frostbitten there in Stalingrad. And he was recovering in Greece when he was captured by the British. They landed in Greece there, and he was in a hospital. And then Albert, he was captured in France by the Americans. He was a truck driver. Fritz was a an Oberleutnant. He was like a first lieutenant. And Albert was like a corporal. And he was a truck driver in France when he was captured by the Americans. And they had a daughter, Erica. She married, I can't think of her name now, but they were from Munich area.
Well, he was also called a doctor, wasn't he? Dr. Nacke?
Well, he was a veterinarian.
Veterinarian.
He was a veterinarian. And he died of cancer. But his brother was killed by the Americans, I think in France. And his parents, I met his parents over there, and I was treated rather coldly because, and I was told later that they didn't like Americans because Americans had killed their son, who was in the German army.
That wouldn't matter how many Americans and Germans had killed, would it?
Yeah.
You know. So,
Now,
we
what
did-
was his name then?
I don't know. Oh, the which?
Father. The father of Erica and Albert and Fritz.
Albert.
Albert was
His name
Erica's
was
father.
Albert.
His name was Albert, yeah.
Oh, Albert's name, okay.
Then Fritz.
I asked him, I said, "Uncle Albert, how many names do you have?" He got to thinking, and then he started naming them all. I think he had 6 or 7 names, named after his brothers and everything.
But now that was Grandpa's brother.
No, it was his nephew,
It
Oh,
was
his nephew.
Yeah.
my grandfather's nephew.
And I was sitting there in the house where my grandfather was born, and I looked through an open door, and I saw a picture on the wall in there. And I said, I don't know who that is, but it's a Nacke. I can tell by his eyes. And they said, yes, that was your great-grandfather.
And we went down to see Tanta Anna, she took us over to great grandfather's grave.
Yeah.
And the cemetery was as immaculate as the floor is here. And she said, this is your great grandfather.
Now, which area was this? Where was it?
Detmold.
That was
Detmold.
where? Deadbolt?
Detmold.
Detmold.
That's where Pap was born. It's on his gravestone there
You better write that down.
in the church.
Deadbolt, yeah.
And that's where they had the Bad Salzufel, we went there.
Bad Salzufel.
Salzufel. That's the salt baths.
Yeah.
Oh,
Health base.
thought that was bad.
If you're feeling bad, and the doctor will send you to this,
And
To the base.
to the bed,
You go to the base for maybe 6 weeks. And
and you
don't do
just
anything.
lay
You
around
rest.
and
Oh.
drink
Lay
the salt
around.
water,
I
drink
forgot.
next to,
You have,
I heard of this.
in the morning, you have your breakfast, and then you get up and you walk. You walk here, and you have your glass here, and it's full of mineral water.
that's what I was trying to
You
think of,
drink,
mineral
you
water.
drink your glass of mineral water, they wash it, put it back up in your spot. You walk 100 yards, and there's an outhouse there. And then just on the other side of that, there's another watering hole. And you walk around there until you get cleaned out, and they're a firm believer in that. Really.
And they got them all over the country. And
They
that's
had
the
'em in
same
Bad
thing.
Nohant.
Bad now, haven't they?
Yeah.
They've got bags there,
Yeah.
health bags. Everything with a bad.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Is-
and
is
and
a-
a beautiful
bad.
building. Had a big glass building, looked like a library or something to that effect.
Well, what they would do, see, it was like a park or like a vacation setting. And they would have string quartets, orchestras, bands and everything for entertainment. And you go there, didn't
Yeah.
cost you anything. It's just to improve your health.
Do you remember those storefront windows too?
I haven't written down what they cost.
That's something like storefront windows, and you're walking by there drinking your mineral water and looking up the suits and the shirts and the pants and the shoes or whatever. Of course, the storefronts is only about that wide, but it was all glass and on that path. And these different stores would have clothing and things for sale. That was quite interesting as far as I was.
Yeah.
And then they had pigeons on the ground, doves. And you can sit out there in the park benches and watch them play the music up there in the, looked like the what was it, library? Looked like a library anyway.
Could be.
Keep the pigeons sitting around and do nothing.
But they had these big camelback trucks, big sea chests. I bet they were 200, 250 years old. They're in the hallway, entrance hallway of the house where my grandfather was born.
Hmm.
They stood up that high.
Where your grandfather was born.
Yeah, big sea chest, and they were so old they were just almost black. A deep, deep walnut between that and black, jet
Now,
black.
did they keep their linen in it or
I
use
don't
it
know
for
what they
anything,
had
or,
in it.
you know,
They were just old.
just old there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We go to the powder room.
Now,
Cut.
how far then is this from,
Where did Larry go?
Interesting.
That's awesome. Oh man, don't get any better than this. Wanna try it? Ready?
Nope.
Rusty tried it. Rusty ski.
She lose her top?
I pulled foot line all the way down to Tecumseh, up to Priest's house, all the way back down to my house. We're gonna go down there and talk to Jim for a second.
Okay. Stop your way back.